think it is. If you have not been here for the rest of the series, if you're new to the channel, I've basically just been reading this book 1 or 2 chapters at a time for almost a year now. So we are a little more than halfway through the book, and it seems like a lot of you just want me to finish the book, so we're gonna keep reading until we get to the end. And hopefully you are noticing that I've been trying to make them more frequently as opposed to making you wait like 2 months or something like that. So if you want to catch up with the rest of the series, there is a playlist on my channel for just this series, and all of the parts leading up to this one are in there. So we are starting part 2. I'll show you. We're starting part 2 today. And we basically are up to the point where John goes back to Germany. His leave is over and he has to go back with his troops. And this is the first time he and Savannah are apart since their relationship started. And they've been together for like 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. Okay, anyway. So, hours later, on that first lonely night back in Germany, I read the letter again, reliving our time together. It was easy. Those memories had already begun to haunt me, and sometimes seemed more real than my life as a soldier. I could feel Savannah's hand in mine, and watched as she shook the ocean water from her hair. I laughed aloud as I recalled my surprise when she rode her first wave to shore. My time with Savannah changed me, and the men in my squad remarked the difference. Over the next couple of weeks, my friend Tony teased me endlessly, smug in the belief that he had finally been proven right about the importance of female companionship. It was my own fault for telling him about Savannah. Tony, however, wanted to know more than I was willing to share. While I was reading, he sat in the seat across from me, grinning like an idiot. "Tell me again about your wild vacation romance," he said. I forced myself to keep my eyes on the page, doing my best to ignore him. Savannah, right? Savannah. Damn, I love that name. Sounds so dainty. But I'll bet she was a tiger in the sack, right? Shut up, Tony. Don't give me that. Haven't I been the one watching out for you all this time? Telling you that you gotta get out. You finally listened, and now it's payback time. I want the details. It's none of your business. But you drank tequila, right? I told you it works every time. I said nothing. Tony threw up his hands. Come on, you can tell me that much, can't you? I don't want to talk about it. Because you're in love. Yeah, that's what you said, but I'm beginning to think you're making the whole thing up. That's right, I made it up. Are we done? He shook his head and rose from his seat. You are one lovesick puppy. I said nothing, but as he walked away, I knew he was right. I was head over heels crazy about Savannah. I would have done anything to be with her, and I requested a transfer to the States. My hard-bitten commanding officer appeared to give it serious consideration. When he asked why, I told him about my dad instead of Savannah. He listened for a while, then leaned back in his seat and said, "The odds aren't good unless your dad's health is an issue." Walking out of his office, I knew I wasn't going anywhere for at least the next 16 months. I didn't bother to hide my disappointment, and the next time the moon was full, I left the barracks and wandered out to one of those grassy areas we used for soccer games. I lay on my back and stared at the moon, remembering it all and hating the fact that I was so far away. From the very beginning, the calls and letters between us were regular. We emailed as well, but I soon learned that Savannah preferred to write, and she wanted me to do the same. I know it's not as immediate as email, but that's what I like about it, she wrote me. I like the surprise of finding a letter in the mailbox and the anxious anticipation I feel when I'm getting ready to open it. I like the fact that I can take it with me to read at my leisure, and that I can lean against a tree and feel smiled at that. She was, after all, wrong about the tent and the makeshift table and the oil lamp, but I had to admit that it did paint a more interesting picture than the reality of the fluorescent-lit, government-issued desk inside my wooden barracks. As the days and weeks wore on, my love for Savannah seemed to grow even stronger. Sometimes I'd sneak away from the guys to be alone. I would take out Savannah's photograph and hold it close, studying every feature. It was strange, but as much as I loved her and remembered our time together, I found that as summer turned to autumn, then changed again to winter, I was more and more thankful for the photograph. Yes, I'd convinced myself that I could remember her exactly, but when I was honest with myself, I knew I was losing the specifics. Or maybe I realized I'd never noticed them at all. In the photo, for instance, I realized that Savannah had a small mole beneath her left eye, something I'd somehow overlooked, or that on close inspection, her smile was slightly crooked. These were imperfections that somehow made her perfect in my eyes, but I hated the fact that I had to use the picture to learn about them. Somehow I went on with my life. As much as I thought about Savannah, as much as I missed her, I had a job to do. Beginning in September, owing to a set of circumstances that even the army had trouble explaining, my squad and I were sent to Kosovo for the second time to join the 1st Armored Division on yet another peacekeeping mission, while pretty much everyone else in the infantry was being sent back to Germany. It was relatively calm, and I didn't fire my gun, but that didn't mean I spent my days picking flowers and pining for Savannah. I cleaned my gun, kept watch for any crazies, and when you're forced to be alert for hours, you're tired by nightfall. I can honestly say I could go 2 or 3 days without wondering what Savannah was doing, or even thinking about her. Did this make my love less real? I asked myself that question dozens of times during that trip, but I always decided it didn't, for the simple reason that her image would ambush me when I least expected it, overwhelming me with the same ache I had the day I'd left. Anything might set it off: a friend talking about his wife, the sight of a couple holding hands, or even the way some of the villagers would smile as we passed. Savannah's letters arrived every 10 days or so, and they'd piled up by the time I got back to Germany. None was like the letter I'd read on the plane. Mostly they were casual and chatty, and she saved her true feelings until the very end. In the meantime, I learned the details of her daily life, that they'd finished the first house a little behind schedule, which made things tougher when it came to building the second house. For that one, they had to work longer hours, even though everyone involved had grown more efficient at their tasks. I learned that after they completed the first house, they had thrown a big party for the entire neighborhood, that they'd been toasted over and over as the afternoon wore on. I learned that the work crew had celebrated by going to the shrimp shack, and that Tim had pronounced it to have the greatest atmosphere of any restaurant he'd been to. I learned that she got most of her fall classes with the teachers she'd requested, and that she was excited by taking adolescent psychology with Dr. Barnes, who had just had a major article published in some psychology journal. I didn't need to believe that Savannah thought of me every time she pounded a nail, or was helping to slide a window into place, or think that in the midst of a conversation with Tim, she would always wish it were me she was talking to. I'd like to think that what we had was deeper than that, and over time that belief made my love for her grow even stronger. Of course, I did want to know that she still cared about me, and in this, Savannah never let me down. I suppose that the reason was I saved every letter she ever sent. Toward the end of each letter, there would always be a few sentences, maybe even a paragraph, where she would write something that made me pause, words that made me remember, and I would find myself rereading passages and trying to imagine her voice as I read them. Like this from the second letter I received. When I think of you and me and what we shared, I know it would be easy for others to dismiss our time together as simply a byproduct of the days and nights spent by the sea, a fling that in the long run would mean absolutely nothing. That's why I don't tell people about us. They wouldn't understand, and I don't feel the need to explain, simply because I know in my heart how real it was. When I think of you, I can't help but smile, knowing that you've completed me somehow. I love you not just for now, but for always, and I dream of the day that you'll take me in your arms again. Or this from the letter after I'd sent her a photograph of me. And finally, I want to thank you for the picture. I've already put it in my wallet. You look healthy and happy, and I have to tell you that I cried when I saw it. say that your last letter worried me. I want to hear about it. I need to hear about it. But I find myself holding my breath and getting scared for you whenever you tell me what life is really like. Here I am, getting ready to go home for Thanksgiving and worrying about tests, and you're someplace dangerous, surrounded by people who want to hurt you. I just wish those people could know you like I do, because then you'd be safe, just like I feel safe when I'm in your arms. Christmas that year was a dismissal affair, but it's always dismissal when you're far from home. It wasn't my first Christmas alone during my years in the service. Every holiday has been spent in Germany, and a couple of guys in our barracks had rigged up a tree of sorts, a green tarp braced with a stick and decorated with blinking lights. More than half of my buddies had gone home. I was one of the unlucky ones who had to stay in case our friends, the Russians, got it in their heads that we were still mortal enemies, and most of the others trooped into town to celebrate Christmas Eve by getting bombed on quality German beer. I'd already opened the package Savannah had sent me, a sweater that reminded me of something Tim would wear, and a batch of homemade cookies, and knew she'd already received the perfume I'd sent her. But I was alone, and as a gift to myself, I splurged on a phone call to Savannah. She hadn't expected the call, and I replayed the excitement in her voice for weeks afterwards. We ended up talking for more than an hour. I had missed the sound of her voice. I'd forgotten her littling accent, and the twang that grew more pronounced whenever she started speaking quickly. I leaned back in my chair, imagining that she was with me and listening as she described the falling snow. At the same time, I realized it was snowing outside my window as well, which, if only for an instant, made it feel as if we were together. By January 2001, I had begun to count down the days to when I'd see her again. My summer leave was coming in June, and I'd be out of the army in less than a year. I'd wake up in the morning and literally tell myself that there were 360 days left, then 359 and 358 till I was out. But I'd see Savannah in 178, then 177 and 176, and so on. It was tangible and real, close enough to allow me to dream of moving back to North Carolina. On the other hand, it unfortunately made time slow down. Isn't that the way it always is when you really want something? It reminded me of being a kid and the lengthening days as I waited for summer vacation. Had it not been for Savannah's letters, I have no doubt that the wait would have seemed much longer. My dad wrote as well, not with the frequency of Savannah, but on his own regular monthly schedule. To my surprise, his letters were 2 or 3 times longer than the page or so I'd been used to. The additional pages were exclusively about coins. In my spare time, I'd visit the computer center and do a bit of research of my own. I'd search for certain coins, collect the history, and send the information back in a letter of my own. I swear the first time I did that, I thought I saw tears on the next letter he sent me. No, not really. I know it was just my imagination, since he never mentioned what I'd done, but I wanted to believe that he pored over the data with the same intensity he used when studying the gray sheet. In February, I was shipped off on maneuvers with other NATO troops, one of those pretend we're in a battle in 1944 exercises in which we were supposedly facing an onslaught of tanks through the German countryside. Kinda pointless if you ask me. Those kinds of wars are long since over, gone the way of Spanish galleons blasting their close-range cannons and the U.S. cavalry riding horseback to the rescue. These days, they never say who the enemies are supposed to be, but everyone knows it's the Russians, which makes even less sense since they're supposed to be our allies now. But even if they aren't, the simple fact is that they don't have that many working tanks anymore, and even if they were secretly building thousands at some plant in Siberia with the intent of overrunning Europe, any advancing wave of tanks would most likely be confronted with airstrikes in our own mechanized divisions instead of the infantry. But what did I know, right? The weather was miserable too, with some freakishly angry cold front moving down from the Arctic just as the maneuver started. It was epic, with snow and sleet and hail and winds topping 50 miles an hour, making me think of Napoleon's troops on the retreat from Moscow. It was so cold that frost formed on my eyebrows. It hurt to breathe, and my fingers would stick to the gun barrel if I touched it accidentally. It stung like hell, getting them unstuck, and I lost a good bit of skin on the tips in the process. But I kept my face covered and stock after that and marched through the icy mud brought on by the endless snow showers, trying my best not to become an ice statue while we pretended to fight the enemy. We spent 10 days doing that. Half of my men got frostbite, the other half suffered from hypothermia, and by the time we finished, my squad was reduced to just 3 or 4 men, all of whom ended up in the infirmary once we got back to base, including me. The whole experience was just about the most ridiculous and idiotic thing the army ever made me do, and that's saying something because I've done a lot of idiotic things for good old Uncle Sam and the Big Red One. At the end, our commander walked through the ward congratulating my squad on a job well done. I wanted to tell him that maybe our time would have been better spent learning modern war tactics, or at the very least, tuned into the Weather Channel. But instead, I offered a salute and an acknowledgement, being the good army grunt that I am. After that, I spent the next few uneventful months on base. Sure, we did the occasional class on weapons or navigation, and every now and then, I'd wander into town for a beer with the guys, but for the most part, I lifted tons of weights, ran hundreds of miles, and kicked Tony's ass whenever we stepped into the boxing ring. Spring in Germany wasn't as bad as I thought it would be after the disaster we went through on maneuvers. Snow melted, flowers came out, and the air began to warm. Well, not really warm, but it rose above freezing, and that was enough for most of my buddies and me to throw on shorts and play frisbee or softball outside. As June finally rolled around, I found myself getting antsy to return to North Carolina. Savannah had graduated and was already in summer school doing classes for her master's degree, so I planned to travel to Chapel Hill. We would have 2 glorious weeks together. Even when I went to see my dad in Wilmington, she planned to come with me, and I found myself feeling alternately nervous and excited and scared at the thought. Yes, we'd corresponded through the mail and talked on the phone. Yes, I'd gone out to stare at the moon on the first night it was full, and in her letter she told me she had too. But I hadn't seen her in nearly a year, and I didn't have any idea how she'd react when we were face to face again. Would she rush into my arms when I got off the plane, or would her reaction be more restrained, perhaps a gentle kiss on the cheek? Would we fall into easy conversation immediately, or would we find ourselves talking about the weather and feeling awkward about each other? I didn't know, and I'd lie awake at night imagining 1,000 different scenarios. Tony knew what I was going through, though he knew better than to call obvious attention to it. Instead, as the date approached, he slapped me on the back. "Gonna see her soon," he said. "You ready for that?" "Yeah." He smirked. "Don't forget to pick up some tequila on the way home." I made a face, and Tony laughed. "It's gonna be just fine," he said. "She loves you, man. She's got to, considering how much you love her." Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit of chapter 13, just because I feel like that chapter wasn't very eventful, and it was kind of on the shorter side. But probably not the whole chapter, we'll see. In June 2001, I was given my leave and left for home immediately, flying from Frankfurt to New York, then on to Raleigh. It was Friday evening, and Savannah had promised to pick me up at the airport before bringing me to Lenore to meet her parents. She dropped that little surprise on me the day before the flight. Now, I had nothing against meeting her parents, mind you. I was sure they were wonderful people and all that, but if I had my way, I would rather have had Savannah all to myself, at least for the first few days. It's kind of hard to make up for lost time with the parents around, even if we didn't get physical, and knowing Savannah, I was pretty sure we wouldn't, though I kept my fingers crossed. How would her parents treat me if I kept their daughter out until the wee hours, even if all we did was lie under the stars? Granted, she was an adult, but her parents were funny when it came to their own kids, and I was under no illusions that they'd be understanding about the whole thing. She would always be their little girl, if you know what I mean. But Savannah had a point when she explained it to me. I had 2 weekends free, and if I planned to see my dad on the second weekend, I had to see hers on the first weekend. Besides, she sounded so excited about the whole thing that all I could say was that I was looking forward to meeting them. Still, I wondered if I'd been able to hold her hand, and I speculated about whether I could talk her into taking a little detour on the way to Lenore. As soon as the plane landed, my anticipation grew, and I could feel my ticker booming. But I didn't know how to act. Should I jog towards her as soon as I spotted her, or stroll casually, cool and in control? I still wasn't sure, but before I could dwell on it, I was in the cattle chute moving up the aisle. I slung my duffel bag over my shoulder as I emerged from the ramp that accessed the terminal. I didn't see her at first, too many folks milling around. When I scanned the area a second time, I saw her off to the left and realized instantly that all my worries had been pointless, for she spotted me and came running at full tilt. I barely had time to drop my duffel bag before she jumped into my arms, and the kiss that followed was like its own magic kingdom, complete with its special language and geography, fabulous myths, and wonders for the ages. And when she pulled back and whispered, "I missed you so much," I felt as if I'd been put back together after spending a year cut in half. I don't know how long we stood together, but when we finally began moving toward the baggage claim, I slipped my hand into hers, knowing that I loved her not only more than the last time I'd seen her, but more than I would have ever thought I would love anyone. On the drive, we talked easily, but we did make a small detour. After pulling into a rest stop, we made out like teenagers. It was great, let's leave it at that, and a couple hours later, we arrived at her house. Her parents were waiting on the porch of a neat two-story Victorian. Surprising me, her mother hugged me as soon as I got close, then offered me a beer. I declined, mostly because I knew I'd be the only one drinking, but I appreciated the effort. Savannah's mom, Jill, was a lot like Savannah. Friendly, open, and a lot sharper than she first came across. Her dad was exactly the same, and I actually had a good time visiting with them. It didn't hurt that Savannah held my hand the whole time and seemed completely at ease doing so. Towards the end of the evening, she and I went for a long moonlit walk. By the time we got back to the house, it felt almost as if we'd never been apart at all. It went without saying that I slept in the guest room. I hadn't expected otherwise, and the room was a lot better than most places I'd stayed, with classic furniture and a comfortable mattress. The air was stuffy, though, and I opened the window, hoping the mountain air would bring welcome cool. It had been a long day. I was still on German time, and I fell asleep immediately, only to wake up an hour later when I heard my door squeak open. Savannah, wearing comfy cotton pajamas and socks, closed the door behind her and started toward the bed, tiptoeing across the floor. She held a finger to her lips to keep me quiet. "My parents would kill me if they knew I was doing this," she said. She crawled into bed beside me and adjusted the covers, pulling them up to her neck as if she were camping in the Arctic. I put my arms around her, loving the way she felt. Excuse me. We kissed and giggled for most of the night, then she sneaked back to her room. I fell asleep again, probably before she reached her room, and awakened to the sight of sunlight streaming in the window. The smell of breakfast came wafting into the room, and I tossed a t-shirt and jeans on and went down to the kitchen. Savannah was at the table, talking with her mom while her dad read the paper, and I felt the weight of their presence when I entered. I took a place at the table, and Savannah's mom poured me a cup of coffee before setting a plate of bacon and eggs in front of me. Savannah, who was sitting across from me, already showered and dressed, was chipper and impossibly fresh-looking in the soft morning light. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, her eyes shining with mischief. I nodded. "Actually, I had the most wonderful dream," I said. "Oh," her mom asked. "What was it about?" I felt Savannah kick me under the table. She shook her head. I have to admit that I enjoyed the sight of Savannah squirming, but enough was enough. I feigned concentration. "I can't remember now," I said. "I hate when that happens," her mother said. "Is breakfast okay?" "It smells great," I said. "Thank you." I glanced at Savannah. "What's on the agenda today?" She leaned across the table. "I was thinking we might go horseback riding. Do you think you'd be up for that? There's a truck that's gonna pass by my street, but we're just gonna keep going." When I hesitated, she laughed. "You'll be fine," she added. "I promise." Easy for you to say. And there's a little break there, so we'll stop there, and we will continue